I'm going to bring Palak. How's it going, Palak?
Hey, it's going well.
Now, you are going to be talking about WebView 2, right?
Yep, yep,
Perfect. Are you all set, sir?
yep. Just gonna share my main
Perfect.
screen over here. Um,
I'll wait for you to show your desktop. Perfect. I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to mute my camera, and you're off to the races, sir. Thank you.
Great, awesome. Hey everyone, my name's Pollock, and I'm a program manager on the Microsoft Edge WebView2 team. And today, I'll be talking to you about how you can bring the best of the web to your .NET applications. So for those of you who are familiar with WebView2 and have been following along with the WebView2 journey so far, WebView2 is officially GA. So now's the time to start building and deploying WebView2 applications. And for those of you who have never heard of WebView2 before, don't worry, I'll be explaining it in more detail right after this. So now that WebView2 is GA, Microsoft is really embracing WebView2 technology. And so I'll walk you through some case studies about how Microsoft is really using WebView2. And finally, after that, I will show you how you can get started building a WebView2 application. And then I'll talk through some of the things we have on the WebView2 roadmap. So let's zoom out a little bit. I think oftentimes when we are deciding when we're creating a new application, we have to decide what technologies we want to use. Do we want to use web technologies or native technologies? And it's a hard choice because there's so many advantages to both. Some of the advantages to a web-based stack are easy code sharing. So if you have to create an application that works on mobile, on web, a desktop application, it's very easy to want to use web-based code because then you can have one code base and have that same experience across all these various platforms. Now, another benefit of web-based code is access to the large web ecosystem and especially the large diverse talent pool. And finally, web technologies really lend themselves towards rapid development and deployment. Now, on the other hand, there's so much you can do with native applications. They're a lot more powerful. You can do things like advanced windowing. You have access to the DRM, access to local file system, just to name a few. So there's so many more things you can do with native. And so it becomes a really hard choice when deciding to use web-based technologies or native technologies. And on the WebView2 theme, we think that they should not be mutually exclusive, that you should be able to take a hybrid approach where you can bring the best of the web and best of native together. And you can do that with WebView2. Let me explain that a step further. So what is a WebView? A WebView is an embeddable browser control that allows you to use web technologies like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript when building applications, native applications. So for example, I have an application on the screen. I can use a WebView to create part of it, for example, a search bar, perhaps even an advertisement segment, or I can create the entire application UI using web-based technology within a WebView. Now, this scenario of using web-based technology in native applications is not new to the Windows developer ecosystem. Originally, the first browser control was an IE-based browser control on the MS-HTML engine. And up until now, one of the biggest advantages of the web browser control is that it has been supported across all Windows versions. However, as the web platform has evolved and modern web standards have been created, the MS-HTML browser engine has not really kept up. And so while it is available across different versions of Windows, it does lag behind in terms of support for modern web standards. So a few years ago, the team launched an Edge HTML WebView, which was based on the legacy Edge and Edge HTML platform. This was a few steps forward in the right direction in terms of offering more modern web standard support. However, the Edge HTML WebView had limited availability on Windows 10 and was inconsistent across different OS versions. And so what we heard from developers was that neither control was good enough for their needs. Developers wanted a control that supported modern web standards and was agnostic of the OS. And so that's what we've built with WebView2. WebView2 is built on Microsoft Edge and the Chromium platform, hence the support for modern web standards. It is consistent across all supported Windows versions and updates agnostically of the OS. Third, WebView2 is available for Win32 developers, .NET developers using WinForms and WPF, and is currently in preview with the WinUI 3.0 project, and will GA when the WinUI 3.0 project GAs, which should be later this year. And finally, an important point here is that WebView2 applications do not require the presence of the Microsoft Edge browser. However, the WebView2 applications do require the presence of a WebView2 runtime in order to work. So the WebView2 runtime is a redistributable runtime. It is not a user-visible browser. Now, under the hood, it has the same binaries as Microsoft Edge that have been tuned and tested specifically for application scenarios. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the WebView2 runtime can be a shared component. So you can have multiple WebView2 applications use the same WebView2 runtime. And finally, the WebView2 runtime can be installed and updated via group policies that IT administrators can set. So now there are two ways to distribute WebView2 applications. And this really involves how you want to ship the WebView2 runtime with your application. And there are two modes, the evergreen distribution mode and the fixed distribution mode. So the main difference between the evergreen and fixed distribution mode is how the application uses the WebView2 runtime. In the evergreen distribution mode, WebView2 applications point to a shared WebView2 runtime that's on the box. Because each application uses a shared WebView2 runtime component, each application just brings on a minimal additional disk footprint. Now, in the fixed version, WebView2 applications package the WebView2 runtime with the application. This leads to a significantly higher disk footprint. Now, the second difference is the update model. So in the evergreen distribution mode, WebView2 applications that point to that shared WebView2 runtime, that shared WebView2 runtime is updated by Microsoft at the same cadence as the Microsoft Edge browser. This ensures that developers have access to the latest and greatest web platform with all new features, security patches, and bug fixes. Now, this leads to a difference in compatibility testing. It is important in the evergreen mode to treat your web content the way the web content in the WebView, the same way you would treat a web content as if it was a website. You should be testing that web content continuously against the non-stable channels of Microsoft Edge just to ensure that your application will always perform as intended. Now, in the fixed distribution mode, because each application has its own version of the WebView2 runtime, it is up to the developer how and when they want to update that WebView2 runtime. And therefore, compatibility testing can be done at the developer's own preference. So by default, WebView2 applications are in the evergreen distribution mode. And we recommend the fixed version only in scenarios where application compatibility is of the utmost importance. So as I mentioned earlier, WebView2 is officially GA. So it's GA across WinForms, WPF, across the .NET versions, .NET Framework 4.6.2 and later, .NET Core 3.1 and later, and .NET 5. And then both distribution modes I mentioned just now, the evergreen and fixed distribution modes, are also now GA as well. So now's the time to really start building, start shipping WebView2 applications. And along the way, if you get stuck, if you have any questions, just want to let us know your status, notice any bugs, have any feature requests, let us know in our feedback repo. And I've linked that feedback repo on our slide at aka.ms/webviewfeedback. It really helps us out a ton, and we love hearing from you. So now that WebView2 is GA, Microsoft is really betting on WebView2 technology for two reasons. First, to replace applications that used older versions of the browser control, like if you remember me talking about the Internet Explorer browser control and the legacy Edge browser control. So we're replacing those. And then two, we're really taking advantage of how you can really bring the best of the web to your native applications. So the first case study I want to highlight is Config Manager's custom tabs experience. Config Manager is an application that IT administrators can use to manage other applications within their organization. Now, the Config Manager has a custom tabs experience in their Software Center. So in the Software Center, IT administrators can pin some of their top websites using these custom tabs. And you can see on the screen, this is a picture of an IT administrator basically trying to pin Microsoft.com, a modern website within their Software Center. Now, Microsoft.com is a modern website, and previously the Software Center custom tabs experience was built using the Internet Explorer-based browser control. And as you can see on the left, this caused users to often be prompted with a script error or a security error, which isn't great. And this is again because the Internet Explorer browser control has not really kept up to date with supporting the latest web standards. So obviously this isn't a great user experience, and the Config Manager team heard your feedback loud and clear on their user voice. And as of currently technical preview and to be launched later this year, is a new custom tabs experience built on top of WebView2, which you can see on the right. Here, you can see that Microsoft.com loads flawlessly without any script or security errors, and this is all really powered by WebView2. So this is just a great example of how you can really drive improvements within your application by swapping out some of these older browser controls like the Internet Explorer one or the Edge HTML one with WebView2. Now, the second case study I want to highlight is Microsoft Outlook's Meeting Insights experience. So Meeting Insights is a experience that allows you to find relevant emails to certain meetings. And you can see that on the left. So Microsoft Outlook also has a web client and a native client. And this Meeting Insights experience was built originally for the web client. And you can see that on the left. So now the Outlook team built a great feature, and they wanted to create the same feature and the same experience on their native application. And on the right, you can see that they've been able to replicate the exact same Meeting Insights experience on the right and using the same code base. And they were able to do that using WebView2. So this is just a great example of how you can bring the best of the web, this code sharing ability, and bring it into your native application without losing the look and feel of what we love about native applications. So now that WebView2 is GA, and you've seen that Microsoft is building off WebView2, I hope you're wondering how you can get started. And so I'm going to dive into a quick demo showing how you can get started with WebView2. So over here, I have a WinForms applications, but just a heads up, this exact demo will work on any of the flavors of WebView2 I mentioned, WinForms, WPF, .NET Framework, .NET Core, .NET 5, it all works. I've just chosen a WinForms application for this demo. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I have the WebView2 SDK installed. So the WebView2 SDK is distributed via NuGet. So I can just go Project, Manage NuGet Packages, and as you can see, I already have WebView2 installed. Now, if WebView2 was not installed, I would just hit Browse, search for WebView2. It'd be the first thing that comes up, and then I could just click Install. But anyways, as you can see, I already have WebView2 installed. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this designer. And all I need to do to get started is just open this toolbox. WebView2 should be at the top. I just need to drag and drop it into the application, and I can expand it. And it's really just that simple. Now I'm going to go over to this properties menu on the right. I'm going to find the source property. And I'm going to have this navigate to html5test.com. Now, there are two things going on here. On the left, I have an Internet Explorer-based browser control. And on the right, I have the WebView2 control that you just saw me put in. And what I've done is I'm going to have both navigate to html5test.com when I run the application. And what html5test.com does is it'll grade each browser platform on a score out of 555 to show how modern the web platform it is and how much in accordance it is with supporting modern web standards. So I'm going to click Start to run this application. It's going to run, as you can see. It's loading html5test.com. And what you see on the left on the Internet Explorer browser control version is that the browser scores just 312 out of 555 points, which isn't great. And on the right, you have the WebView2 control that scores 523 out of 555 points, which is a significant improvement. So if you go back and remember that config manager example that I mentioned previously, you can really get a lot of benefits by swapping out the browser control for a WebView2 based control. And I hope from this demo, you can see just how easy it was to get started and working with the WebView2 control. So now I'm going to take this a step further and explain some more capabilities of WebView2. So let's see what I can do. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm just going to expand this WebView2 box over here to cover the browser control, because we don't need to worry about that anymore. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this form1.cs file. And the first thing I'm going to do is, now that I'm here, is to make sure that I have the core WebView2 object installed. And the core WebView2 object is where most of the WebView2 functionality lies. And that core WebView2 object is initialized asynchronously. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just uncomment this function I've already programmed out. And all it does is it just makes sure that the core WebView2 has been instantiated. And I'm going to call that function in my constructor. Just like that. And let's just see where we're at. I'm going to run this application. So no surprises here. All I'm really doing is still loading html5test.com, and WebView2 is still scoring 523 out of 555 points. Now, when we built the WebView control, we wanted it to be really easy to be able to work across the native app and the web app at the same time, and be able to have content really be able to basically talk to each other very well. And so the first thing I'm going to show you is I'm going to have this native to web button here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be able to show you how you can run JavaScript from the host application to really modify and affect the web content, so you can really deliver on like a very seamless user experience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can turn this white box over here. I'm going to see if I can turn it black. So I'm going to go back to my code. And as you can see, I already have the native to web button. I already have that click function defined. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a simple JavaScript. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that core WebView2 object that I have initialized. And what I'm going to say is, hey, let's get that class name of that div, that white box. And I'm going to then just change its color to black. It's that simple. So this is just the core WebView2 object being able to fire JavaScript. So I'm going to run that again. And let's see if I can turn this div black. I click native to web. And as you can see, it turned black. So that was a good example of how the host app can modify content in the web view. Now let's see if that web content can communicate back to the native component. So what I'm going to do is when I click this web to native button, what I want to have happen is have this string, your browser scores 523 out of 555 points, basically show up over here where it says IE browser control. So let me go back to that designer. And again, this is the native host app based UI. And I'm going to expand that. Great. Now I'm going to go to back to my form1.cs. And I already have the web to native button already defined. And now I'm going to uncomment some code out. All right, let me explain what's happening. So because I don't have access to the JavaScript of html5test.com, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit. And like before, I'm going to execute JavaScript to have the script that I want in on the html5test.com site. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that same div, I'm going to find that div, and then I'm going to tell it to post a message to the web view with that content of that string that I mentioned previously. And so we call this web messaging. And we're going to have that web view basically telling this web view, hey, send this web message back to the native host app. So now on the host app, the core WebView2 object, I want to register an event handler to basically fire when a web message is received. So what this line is doing is it's saying, okay, well, web message is received. When that happens, fire this function update text. And I have that function over here. And what update text is going to do is it's going to take that text that was sent from the web view, and it's going to change that text box that I mentioned previously that said IE browser control and change that text. Let me just walk you through that again really quickly. So sending a script that tells the web view, hey, send a message back to me with the contents of that div. I'm going to register that event handler that's going to receive that message and fire this function update text that's going to change that text box. So I'm going to click start to run. As you can see, the application still loads. Native to web still works. And now when I hit web to native, that same string that was your browser scores 523 out of 555 points is now over here on the native component. So you can see it's really straightforward to have the web components communicate with the native components and the native components communicate with the web components. Great, so I hope you enjoyed that demo. Gonna keep going. So what's next with WebView2? So when we think about what's next with WebView2, we really want to bucket in 3 categories. First, we want to improve the runtime availability of the WebView2 runtime. So if you remember previously, I talked about how the default mode for WebView2 applications is the evergreen distribution mode, which requires a shared WebView2 runtime component to be available. So currently the workflow is when you ship a WebView2 application, to have that application check if the WebView2 runtime exists on that user's device, and if it doesn't, to install the WebView2 runtime, and we have documentation about that to really make that more clear. Now, what we want to do is we want to make this easier by having the WebView runtime already be there for as many machines as possible. So starting next Windows release, the WebView2 runtime will ship inbox in Windows, so that covers all future versions of Windows. And now when we look at previous or existing Windows devices, we're really hoping to piggyback on top of Microsoft partners. So for example, I mentioned previously that Microsoft Office is really embracing WebView2 with the Outlook Meeting Insights feature. So we're really hoping that as they ship out those features, they will ship out that WebView2 runtime, and so it'll just be more ubiquitous among Windows devices. Second thing on our roadmap is .NET 6 support. And this really just symbolizes a larger category that we really want to make sure that our .NET customers are supported and that the WebView2 control just feels very .NET-like. And so that's a category of features that we definitely will continue to prioritize on our roadmap. And finally, everything that we do is really to serve you as our customers, and we really want to respond to your feedback. And that's really important to us. And so really our roadmap is really set by the feedback that we get from you all. And so I really want to drive this in that your voice really, really matters to us. Get in touch with us on our feedback repo at aka.ms/webviewfeedback. Really, it's just a great place for you to ask questions, submit bugs, add new features, and those just directly tie in to what we do as a team and really influences our roadmap. So, looking forward to hearing from you all and connecting with you there. So, as a brief recap, WebView2 is GA for .NET developers. So now's the time to start building and deploying WebView2 applications. As you've seen, Microsoft definitely is. And again, please share your feedback with us. So along the way, if you get stuck, have any questions, if there are any bugs or new features, there's really nothing you can't share with us. And we really want to hear that feedback from you. So what's next? We encourage you to learn more about WebView2. For a more in-depth getting started guide than what I showcased in the demo, you can check them out at ak.ms/webview2. To learn more about the WebView2 runtime, you can go to ak.ms/wvrt. And if you're an IT administrator in the audience, we also have a great documentation on how you can manage the WebView2 runtime as it's deployed within your organizations. And you can check that out at ak.ms/webview2ent. And of course, share your feedback with us at ak.ms/webviewfeedback. Thank you so much. Happy building. And if there's time, I think I can answer some questions.
Yes, we do have some questions. Let me bring them up here. 1 second. I failed to show them here. Give me 2 seconds. Aha.
And just a heads up, if we don't have time to get to your question, you can always reach out to us on our GitHub repo.
Yep. So I was going to say, we have a question from John Krupa from Twitter. He says, with WebView2, is it possible to finally end the life of IE? Let's put IE out of its misery once and for all.
It's a good question. I definitely think WebView2 is a very compelling product. And so I think the politically correct thing to say is if you are using the IE browser control, really consider switching to WebView2. I think it's a really great technology. And you know, hopefully it will.
That's a wonderful answer. Perfect. All right. So what happens if, I'm sorry, for Morton, that Morton wants to know, what happens if I use WebView2 and the user doesn't have the Evergreen version installed? How do I automatically make it a required dependency when using MSX, click once, etc.?
Yeah. So yeah, we obviously understand that the WebView2 runtime that's Evergreen is not installed everywhere. As I mentioned previously, we're doing what we can to see if we can get that more ubiquitous. So, you know, shipping with Windows as of the next release, and then kind of piggybacking on top of the Office installs. And now in the case where the WebView2 runtime is still not installed, you can make it a required dependency with click once. And I believe we have a workflow with MSIX as well. We have documentation about that that you can check out at ak.ms/webview. And we have a few samples available as well that walk you through that workflow.
Perfect.
And if you have any questions, let us know in our feedback repo and we'll happy to walk you through that.
Awesome. We have a couple more and let's see if we can get through them all. Ozzy Bob wants to know, is there guidance on JavaScript desktop bridge to communicate across the boundary between desktop and web hosted parts of the app?
Yeah, we actually have a lot of documentation on this.
Okay.
So you can go on our site, ak.ms/webview, and then if you go under how-tos, we definitely have a how-to doc on kind of elucidating some of this concept further. Yeah, so you can send, again, web messages both ways from the host app to the web content back, and then you can execute JavaScript from the host app into the web view.
Perfect. I was going to say, we'll end right there so we can finish on time. Palik,
Cool.
You did a great job. I'm really looking forward to looking at WebView2 a lot closer. It's a great technology. So thank you so much for doing a presentation for us. So thanks.
Thank you.